Well, good evening, everyone. Welcome to the Center for Contemporary Culture at Hartford Public Library. We are honored this evening to host a panel discussion on Hartford's urban learning environment and to partner with our friends at Connecticut Historical Society. We encourage you to visit the CHS-curated exhibit, Building Public Education in Hartford, at the Hartford History Center on the third floor of this building. It's open today, and it's on view until November 30th. At this time, I would like to welcome to the podium the Executive Director of the Connecticut Historical Society, Mr. Jody Blankenship.
Well, welcome and thank you for coming tonight. This exhibit began with the donation of a fantastic collection of pen and ink drawings from the Welling family. Richard Welling, many of you know, is an artist who really documented Hartford and its changing built environment over time. And when we first got that collection in, we thought, isn't this a great way to explore the city of Hartford and the changing built environment? Because we began with an assumption that the built environment really is a record of our aspirations over time. Whether those have succeeded or failed, they're who we always wanted to be, and they really record where we've wanted to go. So we felt like we needed to do an exhibit on that, and it couldn't just be at our building over in the West End of Hartford. If you're going to explore the built environment, you need to do it in the built environment. So we were really happy to team up with some great partners around the city, and this is the first of a series of programs that we're going to be doing, exploring topics that we felt were important to the city, they're important to us, and we wanted to have a discussion not just about where we've been, but how that leads to where we are and where we want to go next. So, again, I'd like to thank the Hartford Public Library for partnering with us on the satellite exhibit in this evening's program. And I also want to put a plug in for our November 5th program called Reimagining Hartford, Creating the New City, where we'll have a group of people and organizations working on innovative solutions to challenges facing Hartford. I'd also like to thank our sponsors for this evening, CREC and Lincoln Financial Foundation. And I'd like to welcome Marlene Ferrara, Senior Program Officer at Lincoln Financial, and Dina Crowell, Superintendent at CREC, to come up and to be thanked and to say a little bit about your organizations.
Well, thank you to the Connecticut Historical Society and to the Hartford Public Library for giving me this opportunity tonight, because not only is it an excellent program, but it's a wonderful time for me to see some of Lincoln's grantees. And I thank you all for coming out on a not so great weather night. I just want to reinforce that Lincoln Financial Foundation is not just a grant maker. We are investing in Hartford. We're partnering with nonprofits, the school system, and city leaders. We're sharing best practices of all to benefit all of our work and those that we serve. And we're seeking opportunities to facilitate change. So tonight is one of those examples of Lincoln Financial Foundation reaching out, and I'm so glad you could share it. Thank you.
Good evening. I'm happy to welcome you here tonight on behalf of our Executive Director, Dr. Bruce Douglas, who is not able to be here. My name is Dina Crowell, and I serve as the Superintendent of CREC Schools. I have spent a good portion of my career in education thinking about ways to develop creative and effective learning spaces that will actively engage our students. First, by designing creative learning spaces in my classroom as a teacher at Clark School in Hartford, at Batchelder, and at Milner. And then later by leading and supporting other educators to create innovative learning spaces that would inspire and energize students as an instructional leader both in Hartford Public Schools and now at CREC. I can tell you with great certainty that spaces matter. A school is one of the most important buildings in our community. For many students, it's a safe place, it's an inviting place, and it's a constant in their lives. That is why CREC has taken such care in building buildings, schools, and designing spaces that would have a positive impact on teaching and learning. We believe that learning spaces need to be inviting and motivating. They must support the diversity of learning styles. They should be flexible, rich with information and technology, and accessible to all students. Discussions such as these tonight are critical to developing the landscape for learning as we prepare for our students for the 21st century, as 21st century learners. In the world's ever-changing environment inspired by advances in technology, it is the only way we can ensure that students that are graduating, it is important that our schools keep up with and reflect with these changes in technology. And it's the only way we can ensure that our students are graduating from our schools with the essential thinking and learning skills needed to be academically, socially, and emotionally prepared for lifelong learning and global citizenship. We are thrilled that this panel discussion also reflects the renewed partnership between Hartford Public Schools and CREC. Together, we are making significant positive changes on behalf of the children here in Hartford. Through projects such as the turnaround work at Clark School, we're working together to improve existing spaces and to create new spaces for learning, spaces that children will be proud of to call their school. So thank you for being here tonight to share your ideas on Hartford's urban learning environment, and I look forward to hearing our panelists on the topic. Thank you.
Well, now I'd like to introduce tonight's moderator. James Thompson Jr. is Superintendent of Schools for the town of Bloomfield. He's a graduate of Hartford Public High School, and he began teaching elementary school in Hartford. He's spent his career working in environments where significant portions of the population are at or below the poverty level. He's built teams of stakeholders to transform some of the lowest performing schools, and James's leadership has garnered national, regional, and state recognition for improvements in student performance. We are pleased to have him moderate tonight's discussion. James, I'm going to hand it over to you.
Colleagues and friends, thank you for joining us this evening. Tonight, we will be discussing the Hartford urban learning environment. Bertrand Russell once said, "In all affairs, it's a healthy thing now and then to hang a question mark on the things you have long taken for granted." Sage advice, ladies and gentlemen. This evening, there are 3 P's that we're going to adhere to. And the first one, this evening's purpose, is to explore how the educational spaces impact our experiences. The process, or our process, is that key leaders will talk about the Hartford urban learning environment and the payoff. At the conclusion of our brief time together, I hope that this experience will achieve 2 things. Number 1, it will test assumptions that we hold about learning spaces in Hartford and what these spaces mean to our community. And number 2, deepen our understanding of its history's impact. According to Peter Senge, learning organizations are organizations where people continually expand their capacity to create the results they truly desire, where new and expansive patterns of thinking are nurtured, where collective aspiration is set free, and where people are continually learning to see the whole together. And at this time, I'm pleased to introduce our panelists. I understand that Matt Poland is unable to attend, but the next panelist is, I have on my list, is Dr. Beth Navarez, who came to Hartford this year as the new superintendent of the Hartford Public Schools. And I want to say congratulations on your 100+ days. You have just completed and submitted your report. I look forward to reading it. Tyler Smith is an architect who has worked on many school projects. And in his own right, he's also the had an historical impact on the face of Hartford. Tim Sullivan is a lifelong resident of Hartford who served the school district for 23 years before moving to CREC as an assistant superintendent. So, colleagues, today we will explore 6 questions. And panelists, if you don't mind coming forward. Colleagues, we will explore 6 questions. Panelists will have the opportunity to respond to each of the questions, and we have about 30 minutes for our planned discussion. after which we will open the floor for questions and comments from the audience. Let me begin with the first question, and there's no order in terms of who must go first, but the first question is, how is Hartford building and rebuilding its educational spaces?
Excuse me, Doctor. Tyler's just going to do a short PowerPoint presentation first
Okay.
before we get to the question.
Okay, you want to do your presentation?
Sure.
Just go right ahead. You can think about that question. Okay.
Excellent question. Excellent question. Well, first of all, I want to say how pleased I am to be here. When the subject is Hartford, its architects, and schools, that pretty much wraps up everything I have to say. That's pretty much what I've been doing for my, all my civic and professional life in Hartford. So I'm delighted here to be talking about that subject. I guess the most fundamental point I'd like to make, and it echoes your comments, is that I've long believed that the social mission of architecture is every bit as important as its aesthetic aspirations. And I find no building type that better offers the opportunity to bring these two themes together better than one, and what could be better than one generation building schools of distinction for the next generation and the following generations. And so using schools as a departing point or for this discussion, I thought I could just maybe scroll through several slides that kind of try and trace the history of Hartford and its schools, school buildings, some of them, the loss of them, and I think in turn with that, the loss in some of the quality of education and the now renaissance or re-emerging commitment to both great schools of design and great schools of functionality. So let me see how we can. Civic Pride in Hartford schools. Every time we come to CREC for a meeting, one way or another, Dr. Douglas lets us know that he believes that schools ought to be the buildings of highest civic regard in any community and the ones that we are most proud of. This may be familiar to you. This is the Northwest District School. One of the early buildings, I'd say late 19th century buildings, as Hartford started to expand, have a rapidly increasing school population, and this building served Hartford well as a distinctive landmark. It's now on the National Register property and is being renovated and restored for anticipated use as the Johnny Rogers Afro-American Cultural Center, as well as a viable economic building that will provide social services in the Upper Albany neighborhood. But keep this image in mind. This is Hartford High. Perhaps without question, the great, I think, architectural statement of education in Hartford, built in the late 19th century. This is a wonderful drawing that Richard Welling did of this building. And already want to urge you to go see the wonderful drawings that Richard Welling did and that are on exhibition at the Connecticut Historical Society, because they not only document the construction of Hartford, but its destruction as well as its reconstruction. It's a powerful, powerful show. Here, I think this is Chauncey Harris School, right, which was on elementary school on Hudson Street. Another great school built in the late 19th century. And here was Weaver, the commitment to build Weaver in 1924. And what's interesting about this to me is that there was a big building boom, not unlike what we're doing now in the 1920s and 30s. Weaver was built. It was built in sort of in what we call the collegiate Gothic architectural style that you see at Trinity and at Yale and institutions like that, and it was a source of great pride. And it is, I think, it has been a hugely significant building for the Upper Albany community. And by the same architect, this is the original Buckley High, also built 2 years later in 1926. And I think just by its grandeur and dignity, you get a clear sense that these buildings were conceived as significant civic buildings of huge importance. this is the West Middle School, or let's say the 1930 addition to the West Middle School that connected two other historic buildings behind it on Niles Street. And I pointed out because in the 30s, you'll see across Hartford, the symbol of civic pride was this Federalist cupola. And I think it started with the renovations at the same time of the old State House, and then everybody wanted one. The Bushnell wanted one. So they were so proud of it. And the Aetna wanted one. And of course, the school system wanted one and got one. Watch out. This is where things started to go wrong. In 1963, I believe, at the beginning of the so-called modern era, championed by those who believed in urban renewal, that interstate highway system was the key to the future, and commensurate with that, the suburban migration was the beginning of a series of events that had a huge and, in my view, disastrous impact on the city of Hartford. And it started with the demolition of this school to make way for I-84. And while at the time, there was, as far as I know, there was not a lot of civic protest about this, but looking back on it, I see it as the equivalent to the demolition of Penn Station in New York, and it really, in hindsight, did become a pivotal moment in redirecting Hartford's. With that, and when I think of the 1975, down comes this school, deemed to be no longer having merit. The huge addition to the Northwest School was the Jones School, which went all the way down to Woodland Street. That was demolished in 1978. And what replaced it, and why? Here we have the new Buckley High School on Wethersfield Avenue that was built and occupied in 1964. And with that came Weaver High. And it's important here to understand what was going on in that period. In 1963, Hartford experienced its first sit-in demonstrations. There was organizations like NECAP, the North End Community Action Project, that was actively involved in civic issues, housing issues, education issues. While there was all kinds of new buildings being built, there was a suburban exodus that took lots of wealth, residences and businesses out of state. And what was replaced? These schools, I think, actually this was interesting. Hartford bought a package of schools. One design fits all. They think, and they got 2 schools for the price of 1. I think they got 2 schools for the price of 4. Because the outline, what characterized these schools is that they really they don't induce, in my mind, any kind of sense of civic pride. They don't embrace all of the values you talk about of a correct school, of being warm, inviting, a sense of safe. They were really built to address a difficult social era when there were riots in 64, 65, 67, 68 in Hartford. And these schools I think, have more the characteristics of prisons than they do of educational facilities. And they were designed that way. There's no windows in the classroom. They're holding tanks. And to get the full flavor of that, if you're to read Dr. John Stewart's biography, when he was the first African-American fire chief in the city of Hartford in that era, and he was made head of a special operation task force as fire chief to try and reduce the summer riots that were occurring during that time and all of the tension and turmoil. So the architectural characteristics of that time, I think, were a terrible blow. Concurrent with that, there was an interesting phenomenon going on. There was those who got kind of fed up with the demolition and tearing down of the city and decided to do something about it. And it came to a head in 1971 when the Y was to be torn down. And I guess I am proud to be saying I'm carrying that placard because I think it says, it says, a landscape without landmarks is like man without memory. And that was a quote that I remembered from my architecture professor. We lost this battle. But I think what happened and what I think the preservation movement was important to bringing attention to the value of buildings, that had a civic component, the ability to reuse existing buildings, to repurpose them, and it carried with it to a refocusing on the city as a viable place. So I'll move right on. I think I won't read each of these off, but because I think you mentioned most of them. These are the things that I think constitute a good school, a great school. And I appreciate the commitment we're seeing to design excellence, to make schools that are safe and feel safe, and you can see the rest of them. But what comes with this, and what comes with, I think, the reform movement, if you will, that we're seeing that over the last 15 years and going now, is a recommitment of civic pride to make truly good schools. And we've been fortunate to be involved in some of these. And this is the Montessori Magnet School, the first public magnet school in the state of Connecticut. And to the discussion point of how schools can support the curriculum they have is a key element of this. With the Montessori School, as you know, that there's a tremendous emphasis on peer relationships and leadership coming from the higher grades to the lower grades. There's a fundamental notion of the practical life that Maria Montessori believed in, that basically taught things like cleaning, preparing food, and all that were important educational components. So these classrooms have kitchens in them, and the outdoor learning gardens, which are also used to grow food. Another important facet of, I think, these schools and making them welcome is their design, age appropriate in terms of scale, window placement. Someone sitting in a child in that, I think, feels it very much like a home. Just go through a couple other slides. Creating benches and niches that can allow for spontaneous action. Interaction. Here is a school that we did, the first school, in public school again, and I think in Connecticut, multiple discipline, Howard Gardner, and each of the spaces is, this is a large agora space, but each space is designed for one multiple intelligence, and it's key to how students learn in different ways, and as such, this was a kinesthetic classroom that had to be bigger, had to have higher ceilings to allow kind of the physical mobility that came with this educational learning, and outdoor gardens as well. And here's yet another school, a breakthrough magnet school that, again, adopts a theme, in this case, civic pride and responsibility. And here I wanted to show you how preservation can play a key role in quality education by taking what had become a rather very much outdated facility, the original, the Buckley High, the MB Fox School, and that's now in its second year of public school, and I think shows how it can be reclaimed and repurposed, and at the same time, the technology, all the support facilities inside can be included in there, and these, again, I think can represent buildings that parents and everybody can be proud of. And the old theater was restored, and I'll turn this last slide to a challenging project we have underway, which isn't just going into construction, and that is the full renovation of the West Middle School. Again, will be, I think, significant in terms of including a public library branch in it as well as accommodating the program for 750 kids. And the library will, this room will be restored and become the library. There'll be a playground on the roof because it's such a tight site, 750 kids on a 2.5-acre site. But I think, again, this will be the repurposing of an older school that will be a real significant contribution to the neighborhood. So let's talk. That's the background as I see it. I think we got common ground in terms of what we think makes good schools, and I'll love to hear more about others. Thank you.
Tyler Smith, that was an excellent PowerPoint on the history of school design in Hartford. As I was watching that PowerPoint, I had a connection to a number of the schools that were demolished and some that are being renovated, particularly Hartford Public High. I spent my first year there before they tore it down, demolished it. It was very unfortunate. And it was an unfortunate time in Hartford because you're absolutely on point in terms of the construction of I-84, which really tore down 4 neighborhoods. When you stop and think about it, Frog Hollow, the West End, the Solemn Hill area, and also part of downtown. And it was unfortunate that what happened in Hartford at that time, during the 50s and 60s, in Hartford had what they call the bishops. And the bishops, correct me if I'm wrong, Tyler, really controlled what happened. And the bishop decided, one particular one, decided they wanted I-84 to come right next to one of our former department stores that is currently, that houses the Hartford Board of Education. It was very unfortunate. So I just had to add that to this topic tonight. Let's begin the discussion with the first question, is how is Hartford building and rebuilding its educational spaces? And whoever would like to start with that question.
It's a big question. There's a lot going on in terms of how Hartford is building and rebuilding its spaces. I asked my team to share with me, I've been here 100 days, as Dr. Thompson pointed out, so I asked my team for a little bit of history about what's been going on. And in the past 10 years, there have been more than a dozen school buildings that have been renovated or built new in Hartford, which is pretty phenomenal as an outsider coming in, at least for the Hartford Public Schools. And as you know, we have a partnership with CREC, and there are also CREC schools in Hartford as well. So that doesn't even include the building that has gone on in that space. In many of these cases, the buildings were renovated to preserve the history. So it was great to see some of the slides. You saw MD Fox, which repurposed Buckley High School and is just a gorgeous, gorgeous space. I know when I visited the school, I said, my high school didn't look like this high school. I mean, they preserved the marble fireplace and the stained glass windows that are in the libraries, but also upgraded the building so it is ready for a 21st century learning space in terms of the technology. We see buildings such as Capitol Prep, which was, again, a repurposed. Barnard Brown was the original school, but it preserved the historic aspects of the building. Also, though, we see new buildings being put in place to speak to the magnet themes, as you saw in the presentation as well. One of the really unique spaces that you see here is an environmental science school that we have, the Mary Hooker School. And when you walk into that school, there is a huge butterfly conservatory right in the center of the building as you walk in. And it speaks to how we've designed really unique learning spaces that match the themes and the programs that we've added in our educational landscape here in Hartford. You've seen a lot of change in terms of programmatic offerings, very new, creative, and innovative options that have come about over the past decade or so. And so the buildings have kept up with that thinking about the programming. And at the same time, there's still real history and pride in neighborhoods here and wanting to preserve and make sure our neighborhood schools are still at the center and the heart of the community. So you also see buildings and renovations that reflect that desire in the community as well. I'll point out one other thing to answer this question that I think is unique in the landscape of buildings in Hartford. We also have buildings on college campuses that are outside of Hartford as well. So it talks to kind of the regional look that we have in terms of serving kids and the great partnerships that exist with the Hartford Public Schools and again our partner CREC, but also with the higher education institutions that we're blessed to see another great partner, Bob Rath, in the audience from OPP. We have a school run in partnership with them as well. But we have a school in East Hartford on the Goodwin College campus. We have a school at Manchester Community College on their campus as well. And so the school building actually goes beyond the physical landscape of Hartford as well. So you see it's a very dynamic kind of setting that's looking to leverage the amazing partnerships and support that we have here, that looks to make sure schools still preserve the rich educational history in Hartford and make sure that they're the center of neighborhoods, but also speaks to this spirit of innovation and creativity and trying to build unique programs that attract students based on unique strengths and different offerings that really offer specialized educational program opportunities for students. So it's a very unique school district, and the way the buildings have been renovated and are being built really reflects what has gone on in the district educationally as well.
Thank you. Tim?
I think Dr. Navarez points out an important point for us, which is that the definition of schools and Hartford schools has changed dramatically. Yeah. When I started teaching at Weaver High School in 1989, Weaver and Buckley, built in 1974, were amongst the newest buildings in the district. And I think, Tyler, that when your grandson gives this presentation 50 years from now, that this time, which I kind of call the chef era, is going to be seen as a renaissance for educational architecture in Connecticut and specifically in Hartford. At CREC, we have currently just finished or underway 10 building projects worth $566 million. All of those buildings, not all in Hartford, but all those buildings are built for Hartford students. And that's an exciting thing to happen. And I think what we've done is we've, like the politics of the 60s, influenced the architecture of Buckley and Weaver. The politics of today is influencing the architecture that we're building today. And so we're going for smaller schools. We're not in an industrialized era. We're not building schools for 1,800 and 2,000 students anymore. We're building them for 700 students. At CREC, we're building our schools with a 6-12 continuum. We believe the high school students offer leadership to the middle school students, and building schools like Fox Middle and Quirk Middle isn't as effective anymore. And we think we have an opportunity with the 6-12 design to do something different. We're building theme-based schools where we're not trying to be all things to all kids anymore, where you have the shop classes on the first floor and you have the language classes on the third floor, and you get to go, when the bell rings after math class, you get to go to either shop or language based on which track you're in. Those days are over. We're building spaces where all kids work heterogeneously in groups around something they're interested in. And some may go to Harvard, and some may go to University of Hartford, and some may go to Capital Community College, but they're all going to go to college. They're all going to pursue secondary education, because we understand today, which we didn't understand back in the 70s and 80s, that without a college opportunity, these kids are going to be really disadvantaged. So there's lots of exciting things happening. We're excited at CREC to be on the forefront of it. One of my jobs as assistant superintendent is to meet with the architects, the school-based people, and our construction team, and facilitate what kind of spaces we're going to be building and what the priorities are going to be in that building. And I'm hoping as we go through the night, we'll be able to talk about some of the questions that we're facing at CREC that I think are probably universal, and how we are going to deal with those as a society, as an educational institution, and as architects.
Tyler?
I said with my piece. No, it's great to hear, and it's particularly great to hear the growing collaboration of CREC and Hartford school system and working together to really do the best.
Thank you. Next question. What impact does the built environment have on learning, and how can an understanding of that impact lead to better schools and public education spaces?
I'll start with that one.
Sure.
When I moved from Buckley High School to Classical Magnet in 2004, became the principal of Classical Magnet. And if you ever walked into Classical Magnet, there's a big entryway there with the theater on the right, the gym on the left, and the stairwell going up, kind of like Gone with the Wind staircase going up the stairs there. And I walked in, I said, wow. And then I watched the faces of all the students that walked in. And they had this new building with the latest technology. And the wow on their faces. The minute a student gets off the bus or gets out of a parent's car or walks up to the school and walks onto that campus and walks through those doors is a really important moment for a kid instructionally. And what happens the rest of the day, it's almost as important as whether or not he ate breakfast, because the rest of the day is somewhat dictated by how they feel about themselves and their place in society. And that's largely dictated by the kind of educational spaces we give them. If you look at the Hartford Public Library, the wow factor that exists here now, I know that's what Matt would be talking about if he were here. The wow factor that you get at the Hartford Public Library today is different than it was when I was a kid. And I think that those are important pieces of the educational puzzle. That wow factor for kids gets them excited about and energized to learn. And I think we need to make sure that every child in every city, not just Hartford, but every child has that wow factor when they walk in. And we can do it. We can do it together as partners. We as a larger community can do it. But that really needs to be our focus, because that's where the learning starts. The minute they walk in the door and they say, am I respected? Am I loved? Should I have pride in this building? Does society care about me? Am I getting an opportunity, the same opportunity as every other kid? If I lived in West Hartford or Simsbury, or if I got accepted to a magnet school, would I have the same opportunity? And until we can say assuredly that every kid has that feeling of, wow, I'm important, then I think we haven't finished the work, which is exciting because we're going to keep hiring Tyler to build more buildings.
Hey, I like that. No, I just want to endorse that completely. I mean, I think I see it on two levels. I see just what the wow factor, as you say, the more generalized things about how someone the approaches a building, how they enter it, how they feel it when they're in there, how they navigate, how the entrance says come in rather than stay out or check at this point. And those qualities are somewhat subjective, but hugely important to how we perceive our environment. And then obviously, as schools have changed, the facility itself has to respond to a whole set of different technological needs, different learning environments. The square classroom has given way to something called the Fat L, because oftentimes you need things going on in different parts that it can be somewhat removed from the other parts, so it isn't just lined up like this. And so it's fascinating too how the requirements of education dictate the nature of certain spaces, but these overarching components must be there to make you want to be there.
I would just build on what both of them have said by saying it really signals what we value in how we invest in our school buildings, and it shows to children that we value them. You know, when you talk about the condition of schools in urban settings, I think the commitment that we've made here in Hartford really does distinguish this city as showing that we are a city that cares deeply about children and invests in them. I think about Jonathan Kozel's work, Savage Inequalities, when he describes some of the conditions of school buildings in urban areas and talks about, you know, ceilings falling down and bathrooms that don't work, and, you know, what that signals to the children who have to go to those buildings every day. And so the fact that we've worked so hard here in Hartford to make sure that there are just remarkable spaces for children to learn really sends a signal about who we are, and is a record, Jody, of our aspiration. And there's work left to do, right? Even though there's been this incredible push over the past decade, and really a renaissance of rebuilding and new building for our students, there are still some schools that are in desperate need of repair, and it's become an issue of equity. for us in the system. My transition report was just released, as Dr. Thompson mentioned, and one of the recommendations in the report is to take a comprehensive approach to looking at our facilities and planning for the future, because now with these buildings that sparkle, there are buildings that really have been left behind, and children know and families know, what that message sends to them when they have to go to buildings that are in disrepair. So the work moving forward is to take a comprehensive look and really look at the conditions of our facilities, look at capacity, look at enrollment, and look at it as a total city and a total system and total package, because we've been in an era of such rapid growth. There's been so much startup energy and so much addition of buildings. We need to make sure now that we have a system that fits the future, and make sure, as one of my respondents said, we interviewed and surveyed more than 1,700 people as we were gathering information about the current state of the Hartford Public Schools. And one respondent said to me, every student deserves to go to a high-performing, beautiful school. And so that's our work moving forward, making sure that each and every student can attend a school that shows to them that we value them and we love them, and they deserve nothing but the very best.
Thank you. Next question. How does the decision to restore and renovate, as opposed to tear down and rebuild, affect the institutions that inhabit these new old spaces?
That's kind of a tough one. I mean, I think in some cases it can be very obvious, and I think in something like Fox, there's something the bones could tell you that this was a school that ought to be repaired and replaced. I think there's a great challenge confronting Hartford and right now with Weaver. That's a real trick, and in a way, if the new Weaver that's going to be repositioned presents a great architectural challenge. I also say that successfully done, it's a hugely potent message that you've taken something that really was not so great and represented it meeting the values that you've just so clearly articulated. There's some schools that maybe seen their best days and ought to be converted to housing, such as the Cathedral Green, the Catholic high school on Asylum Hill. It outlived that use and yet is pretty great housing. And then maybe there are some buildings that should give way to a new use or new building. So I think you got to take a good hard look. But I kind of sense there's a lot of intuition, feeling you can go in a building and say, hey, this should be repurposed.
Good.
Yeah, it really is mixed,
Yeah.
right? Depending, my team said we try to recycle when we can. We try to reuse and renovate buildings when we can do it, and certainly the architecture is pretty amazing here, and again shows a long legacy and history of a commitment to education here in Hartford. And so when you can renovate buildings like MD Fox, and others, it's just incredible. But sometimes new demands create the need for new spaces. So when we design some of the theme schools and the magnet schools, they require special learning spaces that expect us to create and require kind of new designs and new spaces. So again, it really speaks to the mixed approach that we take here in terms of educational programming too, and we feel like that can coexist. We can have a series of buildings that offer options that are very specialized and don't try to do everything for everyone. But then also there is a really strong feeling here that schools are the heart of a community, and so and really have rich legacies. When you think about really any of the high schools, Hartford Public High School, Buckley High School, Weaver High School, and you run into alumni of those buildings, they talk about their deep affection and love and commitment to those schools. So you also see that really powerful dynamic in the city as well. And so I think you're right, it's tough. And really the decisions are made on a case-by-case basis in terms of how you design the schools to fit the needs of the community and the needs of the educational programming that you're trying to achieve.
I think it's important for us to remember that the schools don't only belong to the students, that the neighborhood sees those buildings oftentimes as kind of a landmark place architecturally. And so the cupola at West Middle, were it to disappear, would be problematic for everybody that lives in a neighborhood or drives up and down Asylum Street. And my experience at Classical Magnet in 2004 is kind of a good example of the mix. So we had the insurance company that we bought on the corner of Asylum and Woodland. And we bought that building, and when we went to go lay out the classrooms, we had pillars every 16 feet, whether we wanted them or not. They were there. And so all of our classrooms at Classical Magnet had to be 16 feet wide when I was the principal there. That was a problem for us. Luckily, we were able to build off the back, and we were able to build the expansive spaces, the black box theater and the gym. It seems that Smith Edwards is probably doing the same thing at West Middle with the drawing that I saw, that you preserve the facade, kind of like they did at the police department, so that the building still feels like it's there, but once you walk through the door, it probably needs to be a different space. As education evolves, the way we approach education is going to change, and so the classroom with the chairs and the screen at the front isn't going to be what we need in 15 or 20 years, and to repurpose those buildings at great expense, knowing that that's not where we're going to be in 20 or 30 years, is probably not a good idea. But I do think that the connection that people have with the architecture in their neighborhood is an important component.
The next question, how does location impact learning?
It's funny because I had that as one of my talking points. At CRAC, we oftentimes have to put students in temporary spaces while we build out their new space. And so we become a big tenant of office spaces. And we pull up to the office building, and inside there's this wonderful learning process going on. And kids are meeting kids from other communities, and the teachers are great. But when they leave that temporary space and go to their new building, it just expands exponentially in terms of what they can do. And the land that we've been able to acquire, unlike the suburban communities where they would take farms and turn them into these expansive pieces of property, in Hartford it's tight. And so land matters, and oftentimes we're not very welcome when we come in with 40 buses at 7:30 in the morning and 4 o'clock in the afternoon into the neighborhood. So I think the land is really a big issue. And I've lived in Hartford my whole life. We have some great parks. We don't have any schools that are in parks. The journalism school has Keeney Park at its back door now. That's nice. But it'd be nice for all of our schools to have that kind of open space. I know if you've ever been in the cafeteria at University High School, but when you sit in their cafeteria, there's this 40-foot high window, arched window that looks out onto the Park River and the land there. That's wonderful, and we need more of that. I think that's part of the educational experience for kids.
Good.
Yeah, and as I mentioned before, location has expanded here beyond the city, and the fact that CREC has schools in a number of different towns as well as Hartford, the fact that we've expanded beyond the city boundaries, also speaks to some real values that we've expressed in this community. Tim alluded to the Sheff versus O'Neill court case, and the fact that that was a catalyst for the creation of many of the magnet schools, because we're saying we believe in the importance of integrated school settings. It's a desegregation case, and so to create opportunities for kids to attend schools so that they're not racially isolated has been a strong commitment that's been made in this state, and we see it played out very strongly in the greater Hartford area through the CREC magnet schools, the magnet schools that are in Hartford, and it's a voluntary way to desegregate schools. And so, the sense of location, it's not, and often people will say to us, because our school system is so different, we're an all-choice school system, so it's not necessarily true that you'll go to the school down the street from where you live. You could go to schools really anywhere in the city, or you have these opportunities to go to schools in the suburbs. And now our schools that exist outside of Hartford as well. So it's very different from a traditional school system where you say, here are the boundaries. You know, if you live here, you're going to go to this school. We've really, you know, forgive the pun, pushed at the boundaries of what it means for location and learning in this area. Again, because of some of the values that this community has adopted in value diversity, and that the importance of kids being exposed to diverse settings, diverse thinking, people of diverse backgrounds, and how that is important for learning.
Tyler?
No, this just generates a question on my part. I wonder, Tim, if you can sense anything of, you know, the school that's, let's say, in Hartford and has a positive impact on the immediate community and the parents and identifying with this landmark. Is that diluted in any way, do you find, when you have, let's say, kids coming from 10 different towns to a school? Are they able to take that home with them, the sense of pride and of place?
Well, we very, very clearly at CREC, we believe it enhances it,
Okay.
right? Because not only is this school good enough for me, but it's good enough for kids from Avon, Simsbury, West Hartford, and Tolland to come to. So we think it enhances it. And then, of course, the opportunities to interact with each other. So we believe that. The problem is if not everybody in the neighborhood can get into the school.
That's right.
And we think that that's an overcomable problem once we have enough great schools everywhere.
That's right.
So we think it can happen. But we, again, believe that having kids come to your neighborhood and go to your school makes you feel special. And that's an important piece.
Thank you very much. Next question. Is there an architectural model schools should use?
Smith Edwards.
Yeah. Ask the expert.
That's who we use.
Ask the expert.
Well, I think maybe the slides of Weaver, I wouldn't go out and just buy one, get me one of those. I think these really schools are handcrafted to meet the needs of a particular community. And I think as design professionals, we're very into something called the program, and they get into the detail of the program of a school. And so each school is unique to itself. And so that's the way I would approach it, and not think about, oh, get me 5 new schools.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's the way we're approaching it. The one exception I would make, I had an opportunity to be the principal at Burns School over on Rush Street for 5 months. And it was a much different experience. It wasn't a magnet school. It was an old building built in 1926, not very much technology, and a real need for the community. I think that as we move forward with the neighborhood schools in Hartford, we really have to build community centers, health centers, legal counseling, food pantries, places where kids can eat on days off and snow days. It really needs to become a community piece. And we were a community school at Burns, but the architecture didn't support the community school concept. There wasn't a community entrance. There wasn't a community alarm pad that you could go in and punch in a code and open the building whenever you wanted. And so you can't have community schools that close at 4:30 on Friday because the staff is going home. You have to find better ways to do that. So if there was a model, I would say that Hartford could use the community model as a starting point. We're not going to build a school that isn't open to the community, because the community needs and the community resources are such that this school can be more than just a school.
Yeah, I would agree with that, and also that there's not one size fits all. And this sense of community is so central in the design process. I would imagine that, you don't say, here you go, here's the school design, but you bring in the voices of the community and try to figure out their needs. I've become fascinated with this company, IDEO, that designs things, and they have this concept of human-centered design and really starting with the end user. And, that seems to me how we go about our school design process here, and say, what are the needs of the community? What are your hopes and dreams? What are the needs in terms of the unique programming that might be brought into the school, and really start from the students and the community and the families and community from the ground up, and really design the building around their desires and needs.
Thank you. And this is our last question. How do transformed spaces impact the transformed roles and missions of public learning organizations?
You know, there's a great example of that change and how we need to change the spaces to keep pace with learning in the 21st century. And it's the need for more collaborative and flexible learning spaces. And so I think about our Pathways Academy of Technology and Design, which is located on the Goodwin College campus. And, you know, the design of that school is a technology-rich school, but lots of places for kids to come together and collaborate. It's not the egg carton design, you know, classrooms where, you know, people go into their own little spaces and they never have the opportunity to come and work together. And we just know for the future that our kids need to know how to work with one another. They know how to be savvy in terms of using technology. They need to know how to communicate well. And so spaces that give lots of opportunities for people to come together and learn with each other. Also, when in my former district, we were redesigning a high school with a project-based learning theme at its heart. And one of the things the architects told us when they were designing the space was for project-based learning schools, you also need to think about storage space, because kids are, you know, really building and creating projects, and they need a place to put the projects. And I had never thought about that. And so as we're you know, creating these kinds of rich opportunities for kids that involve technology, that involve real hands-on learning pieces, and the opportunity for people to come together and talk and design and collaborate. That's an important transformation in the design of schools that I think we'll see for a long time to come, but it really speaks to what our kids need to know and be able to do in the 21st century.
I don't know if I have anything to add to that. It makes me think anecdotally, every time we go to a meeting and Dr. Douglas is there, he'll challenge us right away. And if we use the word library, what is a library today? It isn't that. And keeps pushing to force us as designers to really think about how the experiences that go on in library and the support systems that are needed, and it's great. And I would just close in my comments. I'm absolutely convinced that the best results, best buildings result from having a totally engaged client, such as I find that CREC is, and increasingly that Hartford is, where they're engaged. They're telling us what we want. We push back, and out of that, I think there's a synthesis that results in design excellence.
Yeah, I think that at CREC, we're trying to engage in what we call crystal ball architecture, right? So we're trying to figure out what learning is going to look like 20 years from now. One of our schools, Public Safety Academy up in Enfield, just opened, and we have about every 8 feet, we have space to hang a television where a group of 4 or 5 students can work together with their individual pet devices and use that television as the screen to show each other their work and work collaboratively. So the smart boards, we believe, are going to be dead in the future, right? It's going to be that individual instruction, and that small group instruction is going to take over. We're building space at Two Rivers High School we're going to be trying to build one, and it's going to be a beautiful building, and we're building it for STEM work, and we're building 4 what we call super labs, which are almost like empty warehouses because they have to be flexible. Right now, it's green technologies and robotics and aquaponics, but 10 years from now, it may be something completely different. And so we have to build the spaces flexible enough to make that happen. We're not building computer labs anymore. We're not as excited about libraries as we used to be because the definition of library is changing. Dina Crowell's looking at me like, yes, we are excited about libraries. But it's been an ongoing conversation, and I think that with wireless access, with the opportunity to collaborate, that we really have to rethink what the schools are. If the Hartford High that got knocked out by 84 was still around, chances are pretty good it wouldn't support the kind of learning we think kids need to do today. So we got to try to think about how these spaces are going to be flexible as we move forward, so that we don't get trapped into a learning model that's built around 20th century thinking instead of 21st century thinking.
You've done very well with time. Right on the minute. And at this time, we would like to invite questions or comments from the audience.
Hold on, I'll bring the mic.
Okay, hi everybody. My name is my name is Leticia Houston, and I just have some comments about what we discussed today. I kind of wanted to just tell my story because it was interesting watching the slides because I actually attended Montessori Magnet when it first opened, when it was on Lime Street, and then I also went to Metropolitan Learning Center in Bloomfield. And now I work for Junior Achievement, and I actually am in charge of the educational programs in the Hartford Public Schools, so I go in and out the Hartford Public Schools just about every day. So I just wanted to talk about the importance of having a beautiful space, because I've definitely seen the difference between going into a CREC school or attending a CREC school and then going in and out of the Hartford Public Schools every day. So when I was in high school at MLC, during the day I was at MLC, and then afterwards I played sports for Weaver because we didn't have sports at MLC, and it was a complete difference. And the difference with that was we had, MLC had only been open for a few years. Our actual first graduating class was in 2005. So that building was brand new. We had smart boards in all of our classrooms, and we all had laptops that we used for our assignments. And the environment was a great environment. Weaver, also a very great environment, but I spent a lot of time at Weaver High School with playing sports and then also working for the Blue Hill Civic Association, teaching the students as well. And completely different environment, and I noticed the change in students' behavior. I noticed the change in them wanting to go to school and then being dedicated to their schoolwork. I noticed, just a lot of changes with going to MLC and then going to Weaver, and I think it's so important that we improve our neighborhood schools, as I am in them every day, and I have the opportunity to work with some CREC schools, some new ones, and then working with Clark and Milner and the Batchelders and all those schools as well. So I think that the project is very exciting, and I'm definitely going to be tuning in every moment to see, what are some of our updates to the new neighborhood schools will be.
Thank you.
Having been a graduate of an open classroom environment in Bloomfield in the 70s, which was the solution. We knew that was the right way to teach. And as one of the mice going through that process, it didn't work out so well. What research is, you're developing all these new small schools. They sound like they're really good ideas. What research has there been done to say, yes, this is the right model? Or can you not do research on this? I mean, I'm certain the folks who built the open school system in the 70s were every bit as convinced they had the right answer as you guys do. And not so much.
Tim, that's one for you, I think.
So, first of all, the research on small schools has been very positive. It's in its incubated stages, right? People haven't built enough small schools and built them in enough different kinds of communities to know whether or not the research is definitive. We may look back in 20 years and change our mind, but we're really confident that small schools where students can build relationships with the people in the building, where you're not a social security number, where your teachers know your name and know who your family is, that those kind of things are really important. We also believe in the pre-K 3 to 5th grade continuum, where you're in the same school for 8 years, and then the 6 to 12 continuum, where you're in another school for 7 years. So that the fewer transitions you have, we think are better. A lot of our suburban neighbors have a pre-K, a kindergarten to 3 school, and then a 4 or 5 school, and then a 6, 7 school. And we believe that the continuity that exists as you go through a school is an important one, again, because of those relationships. We think if kids have grounded relationships, that's going to work for them. And then we have to be flexible enough to be able to adapt, and that's one of the things CREC has been really good at, is adapting to the new things that are coming along. Personalized learning is coming down the pike. Are we guaranteeing that it's the way to go? No, but we definitely want to be out the front of it and make sure that the work we're doing is research-based, is supported by good common sense. Sometimes we say, don't let a good idea get in the way of common sense. I think open classrooms might have been one of those chances where we let a good idea get in the way of common sense.
I would just build on the small schools piece. About a week ago in the New York Times, there was an article that talked about how effective small schools have been in New York City, and it's for some of the reasons that Tim spoke about and why small schools are effective in urban settings, and it's exactly right. It's that connection and that relationship and making sure that each student is known well and has the support that they need to be successful. And so I love this mantra of every child known by name, strength, and need. And when you have a small school, you have a better chance of making sure that each child is known really well, and we can match the instruction and the supports to exactly what they need. And so I think that's why the small schools are such a great fit for the Hartford community. And, you know, I would say we don't let fad drive the design of the schools moving forward here. Yes, we have specialized designs, but that's linked to a system of choice where people are saying, I want this type of educational experience for my student, or I want that choice. And so where we see the unique designs come into play in school buildings is because of the philosophy that we have, that we want to have a variety of opportunities, again, that speak to interests of families and kids, and are set up to capitalize on their strengths and deepen their interests and connect with them.
Hi, I'm Dan Heyman. I work in public works for the city of Hartford. The one thing that, you know, being involved with school construction, I think it's important to acknowledge the role of the state in funding school construction. It hasn't been mentioned today. But also, you know, the state has a lot of restrictions on school construction. And you spoke of small schools. And as a school gets smaller, the area per student increases. And the state has these ceilings regarding that. And I know that if you build a smaller school in terms of enrollment, the things that you need in terms of specialized spaces, like labs or even auditoriums, gyms, and cafeterias, throw that area per pupil above what the state will allow in the buildings that they fund. So I'm wondering how you reconcile a movement towards smaller schools with what the state mandates in terms of area per pupil.
Sure. I mean, some of the ways we've done it is by co-location. So, for example, at Hartford Public High School, there are 3 academies. There are 3 separate schools, but that share the same space. They each have their own principal. They each have their own unique theme, but they share the space in the larger school. We have that example at our Global Communications Academy as well. We have the global school there. We also have a pre-K magnet there, and then also a charter school is housed there as well. So it's one way that you can build a larger building, but also break it down so that you have small schools co-located within a larger space.
I think that's an important piece, and one of the things we've done at CREC, I mean, this is what I do for a living, right? I sit with Tyler, and I say, how many square feet do we have, Tyler?
Right.
And he says, we're limited to 108,000 square feet, and so we play with the numbers until we can fit inside that building that the state's gonna allow us to build. But one of the things that we've done with the small schools is we've stopped trying to be all things to all children in a magnet school. So you don't have to build everything they built at Buckley and Weaver in your high schools. You have to build what the students that are coming to that school for that theme need. Now, that's an advantage we have as a theme school, is we don't need to build everything. We just need to build what we need, and I think we've been able to do that effectively. I think if you come visit our buildings, as small as they are, our middle high schools we try to build for 750 students, and our elementary schools we're right now trying to build for 522 students. Those schools are manageable. They're not so small that they're unmanageable, and they're not so big that kids become anonymous. We don't want any invisible children in our schools. We want everybody to know everybody. And so we think we found the happy medium with those numbers. And when you're building, not to try to have everything for everybody, but you're trying to customize your theme and what activities you're gonna be doing in that school. Some of our schools don't have gyms. You know, they have a fitness center, and the space that we would have used for a gym, we used for other spaces to merely enhance the work that we're doing around the theme.
I was going to push back a little bit. I think there need be more flexibility and discussion with the funding source about things. An extreme example
That
is
was
this-
where I was going with the question.
Oh, okay. Well, just to say, we've had some casual discussions about doing a farm school. Well, try fitting a farm school into the square footage calculation. How much, if you've got 5 cows and 4 students, and you get X number of feet to do this, it just doesn't work. So I'd love to see some kind of process where there's more acknowledgement on the, I know it's a bureaucratic, managing all the state schools and funding them is a big thing, but I don't know if there's any avenues for more flexibility on that end to do what you
Well,
want to
maybe
do.
part of our new partnership will be go arm in arm to the state and challenge those regulations and challenge how much money we get and how many square feet we get to build for kids, because together we can get a lot done.
Yeah, I'm wondering too if there's an answer that might involve more programmatic utilization of the spaces, rather than having a classroom assigned to a teacher. And at the times when the kid is in the library or the kid is in the gym, that classroom is unused for some portion of the day, to utilize the spaces more efficiently to get higher utilization of each space throughout the day. And that way you could satisfy more program with less space.
Yeah, we're using a model like that at Public Safety Academy. So teachers don't really have desks and space in the classrooms. Their desk space and their workplace is a collaborative space. I think Capital Prep has the same thing. They call it the bullpen, where teachers come during their free time. They evacuate their room and they come to a common space where it allows them to collaborate, and it also allows that room to be utilized while they're not in it.
Dan, I think on the interesting model is perhaps on the collegiate level, where UConn coming downtown is talking about using Infinity Hall during the day for a lecture hall, and there could be a music venue at night, and use the Athenaeum as a resource, and really redefining how they're going to run their programs, and it's a collaborative and fascinating option.
That's right, and another example of that collaboration and thinking about the use of shared spaces at Goodwin College. So we have our high school there, but they also have access to the college campus. They use the high school for some of their programming needs. They're looking to expand programming into an advanced manufacturing program that is also available to incubate small businesses, and so they really see that space as really dynamic. They said, we just don't want to be landlords of your high school. We want to make sure that this is all space that we can share and we can maximize the use of the space for multiple purposes. So.
And the community use I was talking about earlier, if that building is open on Friday night, all day Saturday and all day Sunday, if it's open all summer, if it's open during Christmas break and during April break, then it's easier for us, I think, to justify as a community why we need to put so many millions of dollars and so many thousands of square feet into a space that's more than just a school.
I think we can do one more question. Do we have anybody?
There's one in the back there.
Hi, my name is Angela McCrary. I'm from Hartford, Connecticut. I just ask you one question. Question is, the schools that they have a winter vacation and so on and so forth, or what the school boards of 2014 and 2015 of a school year.
So if the question was about school calendars, we're working regionally to collaborate on school calendars. This year, for the first time, my son and wife, who are both in the Hartford Public Schools, and I have the same vacation. We're a little worried about getting a plane ticket out of Bradley on that Saturday, because everybody in the region has the same plane ticket. But we're working hard together regionally to get a uniform calendar, because we think there's some savings there that can be utilized and get us to a different place.
And I would say there are some schools that look to use the space year-round. Capital Prep is one of our schools that has a different calendar for their school year. Again, one of the unique opportunities that's offered and we're able to offer in the systems of choice that we offer to families. And so, I know when I was starting in July, I was like, no one's going to be around. Well, Capital Prep was in school, for their other session. And so you see that as well, that we're looking at how we use schools and space differently across time. And I'm surprised more schools don't do that, but it's been a hard tradition, right, to break, to come away from the summer space. But there are some schools that do tend to work over traditional break and vacation spaces.
Just want to say thank you, panelists, our audience, for an insightful dialogue on Hartford's urban learning environment. In reflection to Bertrand Russell's advice, hung a question mark on the things we have long taken for granted. I have learned a great deal. And thank you as well to our gracious hosts, the Hartford Public Library, the Connecticut Historical Society, and the Capital Region Education Council. Thank you.